All right, let's dive into a really high-stakes diplomatic story that's been happening, mostly behind the scenes. We're talking about the United States and Iran. They're talking, but not to each other directly. What they figure out could seriously change things in the Middle East. So let's decode what's going on with this Muscat channel.
So picture this. In the pretty quiet capital of Muscat, Oman, there's this really delicate diplomatic dance, let's call it, going on. It's happening way off the radar, far from the big headlines, but believe me, what comes out of these talks could create some major waves across the whole Middle East, and probably even further.
So what is it about this meeting in Muscat that's so different? Well, it all starts with the setup, really, and a structure that's built around one key fact.
And here's the kicker, the most telling detail of all. The U.S. and Iranian officials, they're not even in the same room. I mean, this is not your typical sit-down negotiation. It's a conversation that's happening through a third party. And that tells you everything you need to know about the level of trust between them right now.
Okay, so if they're not talking face-to-face, you're probably wondering, how on earth does this even work? Let's break down who the key players are and get into the nuts and bolts of this pretty unique process.
Right, so you've got three main parties in the mix. First, the two big ones, the United States and Iran. And then you have the absolutely essential third player, Oman, who stepped in to act as the go-between, the mediator.
So what's a mediator, exactly? Think of Oman as a kind of trusted messenger, a neutral referee. They have this long track record of not taking sides in the region, which makes them one of the very, very few countries that both the US and Iran actually trust. They trust them to pass messages back and forth without twisting them. Honestly, without Oman in the middle, these talks just wouldn't be happening, period.
And the process, it's a classic case of what they call shuttle diplomacy. It works like this. The U.S. team tells the Omani officials their position. Then, those officials literally walk that message over to the Iranian team. The Iranians talk it over, figure out a response, and give that to the Omanis who, you guessed it, shuttle it back to the Americans.
Yeah.
It's slow, it's methodical, but right now, it's the only way to keep this incredibly fragile conversation alive.
All right, so we've covered the how. Now let's get to the what. What are they actually talking about? Well, it all boils down to one huge trade-off: nukes for sanctions.
Yeah, this is the heart of the whole thing. On one side, you have the U.S. Its goal is to put some serious limits on Iran's uranium enrichment program. That's the process that can be used to make fuel for nuclear power, but also for weapons. So the U.S. wants them to pump the brakes. On the other side, what does Iran want? They want out from under these really tough economic sanctions that have been absolutely hammering their economy for years.
Now, it's important to say that Iran's official story on this has been consistent for a long, long time. They insist their nuclear program is purely for peaceful things like generating electricity, and that they have zero interest in building weapons.
So you can see why Iran is even at the table, right? The sanctions have had a huge impact. We're talking a devastated economy, a currency that's worth a fraction of what it used to be, and massive cuts to their oil sales, which is their main source of cash. That economic pain, that's the real pressure point pushing them towards some kind of deal.
And this brings us right back to the million-dollar question hanging over these talks. Can this neutral mediator, Oman, actually build a bridge strong enough to get these two sides to find some common ground? Is a deal even possible?
But these talks aren't just happening in a bubble. To really get why they're so urgent, we have to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture in the region. It's all about why this matters so much, right now.
There's a quote floating around from analysts that I think really nails it. It says that even limited progress could help reduce the risk of escalation. And that's it right there. That's why everyone is watching so closely. The stakes are just incredibly high. And in this environment, even a tiny step in the right direction feels like a huge win.
I mean, the whole Middle East is basically a tinderbox at the moment. You've got ongoing conflicts, you've got all this instability, and there's this constant worry that just one wrong move, one little miscalculation could spark a much bigger military fight. So these talks, you can think of them as a potential off-ramp, a way to de-escalate before things get out of hand.
So where are we right now? What's the current status, and what should we be looking for next?
Well, the official word is what you'd call cautiously optimistic. You hear phrases like a positive first step. Now, in diplomat speak, that basically means, hey, it's great that we're talking, but don't get your hopes up for a major breakthrough just yet. It's all about managing expectations.
And this is a really key point. The people in that room in Muscat, they can't sign off on the final deal. Anything they agree on has to be sent back home to Washington and to Tehran for the top leadership to approve. And you can bet it's going to face some serious political heat on both sides.
So for now, the Muscat channel is still open. The quiet talks are expected to continue, and pretty much the whole world is watching and waiting to see if this little flicker of dialogue can actually catch fire and become something more real.
Which leaves us with a big, lingering question, doesn't it? Are these talks the start of a real path to peace? Or is this just a brief pause, a timeout in a standoff that's been going on for decades? I guess we'll have to wait and see.